Hi, I'm Jack from GatelyAcademy. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the 6 different types of agency in Massachusetts. And by agency, we don't mean real estate agency. We mean the relationship between the real estate salesperson or broker and the consumer. So it's the relationship between the real estate salesperson and the consumer. And you can have 6 types of agency here in Massachusetts. You could have a buyer agency and a seller agency. And these are by far the most common. The vast majority of time when you are an agent, you're either going to be representing the buyer's interest exclusively or the seller's interest exclusively. Each one of these is known as being a single agent. A single agent, you're an agent of one party only. Now, those are the easy ones. Let's get into these other ones that are on the list. Dual, designated, sub-agent, which you probably haven't heard of, and facilitator. So let's get into those 4. As a dual agent, you're going to work for both sides of the transaction. So warning, very big warning here. In order to act as a dual agent, you must get advanced written consent from both parties. Very, very important. It is a major violation to conduct yourself as a dual agent without getting advanced written consent. Most of the times, you're going to get that from the seller as part of the listing agreement, and from the buyer, there is a separate form published by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to get the buyer's consent for it. As a dual agent, you will not be able to provide all of the fiduciary duties. And if you're not up to date on the fiduciary duties, we're going to cover those in a different video, but you will not be able to provide all of them. Think for a moment, how can you be loyal to both the buyer and the seller at the same time? That's a little tricky, right? So basically impossible. So we're going to talk about that in one of our other videos about the fiduciary duties. Another important aspect here, of course, is that this probably means that you're going to get paid double, which from your point of view might be a beautiful thing, right? You're going to be representing both the buyer side and the seller side, so you're going to get paid double. So that's great for you, but on the consumer side, from the buyer and seller, they're actually getting less representation. There's really no other way to cut that. They are receiving fewer fiduciary responsibilities. There are a total of 6, and they're only getting 3. They're getting confidentiality, accounting of funds, and reasonable care. Ooh, you might want to write that down. That sounds like a really good test question. Number 4 is designated agent. I'm always surprised at how many licensed real estate agents don't actually understand designated agent, but let's get into it for you here. Once again, you're going to need consent from both parties to conduct yourself as a designated agent. And once again, you're probably going to have that from the seller inside of the listing agreement, and then again there's a separate form that the buyer can sign, but you got to get the consent in advance to be a designated agent. Here's how it works. It's really not that actually super complicated. If we were to actually create a real estate agency, let's just say that this is the real estate agency, we'll call it Acme Real Estate, and we have an agent inside of Acme Real Estate that represents the seller on the transaction for 12 Maple Avenue. And they're a seller agent, and we also have an agent in the same Acme Real Estate office that's the buyer agent for 12 Maple Avenue. So in this case here, these 2 agents are co-broking the deal inside of the same real estate agency. So they're co-broking with their co-worker. Another way to kind of think about this is that it's one agency, one deal, 2 agents. Yeah, that's another great way to think about it as well. And of course, again, You're going to have to consent or get consent from the parties, the principals, and also you're going to have to talk to your broker. Some brokers don't allow you to do this, and most do, but some don't. So you're going to have to talk with your broker before you head down this road. The next one is subagent. Subagent. Subagent is rare. You may not have heard about it before, but it is legal, and therefore it could be on the exam, so you better know what it is. Let's give you a little flow chart of how it works. You have a seller, and of course the seller contracts with an agency and a list agent. There you go. So that's pretty much as it is today. But all of the other agents in town, here's a bunch of agents in town, they had hoped that they got the listing, but they didn't. And there's a bunch of buyers in the marketplace looking for houses. And let's draw a line here to kind of show you who's on whose side. Everyone above this line works for the seller. You'll notice there are no agents below that line. So even if this agent here develops a really strong bond with this buyer there, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because that agent actually works for the list agent. They're an agent of the list agent. They're a sub-agent. Oh, I get it, Jack. There you go. And of course, the list agent works for the seller. Another reason why we don't do this on a regular basis nowadays is because it exposes the seller to what we call vicarious liability. And that actually sounds like a really good test question. And lastly is facilitator. Facilitator is sometimes known as a non-agent. Wait a second, Jack. How can they be a non-agent? Aren't we talking about types of agency? Well, a facilitator is a type of licensee who does not work for either side. Doesn't work for either side. Well, what's going on here? What do you mean doesn't work for either side? Well, maybe if I could kind of interject a word, does not yet work for either side. Does not yet work for either side. Very likely, when you use the facilitator designation, you're going to be using it at a listing appointment, A listing appointment is an interesting thing because when you go to a listing appointment, you're not yet that person's agent. And what develops is a very curious legal kind of thing where what if you go over to their house, they tell you all sorts of things, including maybe the lowest price that they'd be willing to accept. But then, heaven forbid, they give the listing to somebody else and you don't get the listing. What happens with that information? What happens with that information if a couple of weeks later you actually find a buyer? Well, you know what the seller is willing to sell it for, and now you work for the buyer. How do you think that seller is going to feel if you take this information that you learned and now use it 2 weeks later against them? They're not going to be very happy. And you're probably going to be in a lot of hot water unless you got them to sign off that you were working as a facilitator who is there just to assist and that you're technically a non-agent. And this sounds like a really good test question, this next thing I'm going to tell you. A facilitator is a waiver of confidentiality. Ooh, that definitely sounds like it could be on the exam. The facilitator designation or type of agency includes a waiver of confidentiality. Super, super important. All right, so again, just really quickly, buyer, seller, agency, they're a type of single agents. Dual agency, when you work for both sides, it's a beautiful thing. You're going to get paid double, but the consumer only gets half of the fiduciary responsibilities. Designated agency, a designated agency or agent is a single agent. The only weird part about it is that whoever you're negotiating with is your coworker, but you are a type of single agent. Sub-agent, which once again is very rare, but we talked about it. And this one here, facilitator. All right, so if you haven't seen the fiduciary duties video, what you do is you want to cross-reference that video with this video. In the fiduciary video, we're going to put a little matrix at the very end of that video so that you can figure out which duties you owe, depending upon which one of the agencies you offered in this video.